I'm down to one last breath, but I can't stop now. We all fall down sometimes, yeah, but that's just life. So cross my heart and hope to die. Baby, I was born to fight the fear when I feel like dying.
Real quick, before we jump into the episode, I want to take this opportunity to do a plug-in for my Substack. For those that don't know, before I created video or audio content, I was a writer. I've been writing since I was little, and Substack is a great platform for writers, and I've structured mine in a way that it complements the podcast episodes. It's free to subscribe to my weekly Substack newsletter, but for just $5 a month or $50 annually, you can gain access to the full archive of posts as well as additional resources exclusive to paid subscribers. Tomorrow is the start of a 3-part email series titled Slow to Speak. If you're within the adoption, foster, and kinship care communities and have fielded one too many curious, insensitive, or intrusive questions, this series is for you. I hope to see you on Substack, but for now, back to the podcast. We are back with another episode of the Grief and Gratitude. Welcome back. Welcome. No. I messed that up too many times to recover from. Here we go. And encouraged is the word that I always forget. Encouraged. I want to encourage you. You wouldn't think so because I keep forgetting it. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. I don't know how to sing, but people do that before they talk on a show. I can rap, and I can rhyme, and I can say Sally sold seashells by the seashore about a dozen times. Oh my word, if you guys only knew how weird I was. I'm looking at the wrong side. The camera is over here. Okay. Once more. Welcome back to the Grief and Gratitude podcast hosted by me, Raquel McLeod. As always, this will be a safe space for adoption and kinship care conversations that I've cultivated organically through years of lived experience, education, and community. I hope that you leave here feeling seen or encouraged, but most importantly, equipped to move forward. You guys, this is, we had an introduction. We had 3, 4, I think this is the 5th, maybe the 6th episode. Who'da thunk it? I had no idea people would like to just sit and listen to me talk. And I'm really good at that, talking. I do enjoy that. So today is a little bit different. This is a special episode in which I have involved my Instagram community. And a couple weeks ago, by the time you're listening to this, it will have been a couple weeks ago, I put up a question box in my stories on Instagram and just said, what would you like to ask a birth mother? And I prefaced it by saying, I understand that it is a tricky place to be in because so many people have questions that they're afraid to ask because they don't want to offend. But I am quite good at deciding if someone is trying to be hurtful intentionally or if they're genuinely just curious and maybe don't have the right words or the right way of asking a question without it coming across as offensive or hurtful. And so, lucky for you, I'm not easily offended, and I feel like that's a really important qualifier when we hold space in communities like this. It's if you can distinguish between someone who's being intentionally hurtful and someone who genuinely just doesn't know. We don't know what we don't know, right? That goes for me too. And so when I put the question box up, I was like, you're not going to offend me unless you're trying to be mean. And I don't have people like that follow me. So I trusted that the questions that came in would be thoughtful and intentional, and they were. And I have screenshots of all the questions because I wasn't going to write them all down. That was just a lot of a waste of my time to rewrite them when I can just pick up my tablet and read them. And I'm not concerned about the cinematic element of this video aside from the fact that I'm videoing in my cinematic feature on my iPhone because I love it because it makes me feel like a movie star. I'm going to answer as many of them as I can. as honestly as I can and as candidly as I can. I've not pre-read them, so these are new to me too. I didn't want to try to script an answer. I wanted it to be in the moment, genuine, authentic, and I am confident enough in what I speak about and the fact that I am a birth mom that I just felt like it would go smoothly. So let's hope that it does, and if it doesn't, I'll cut out what I need to, because I can do that post-production. Okay, I'm feeling a little more hyper than usual, and for those watching, you'll be able to tell, and for those listening, you may hear it in my voice. Sometimes I get in these silly moods, I don't know, and so I'm just being really expressive, I guess is all. Let's get into the questions, and these are in no particular order. I'm just going to read one, answer it, and then we'll move on. The first question is, what could be happening when birth mom goes dark, in parentheses, from communication intermittently? Intermittently. A lot of it has to do with my southern accent. I've learned that through teaching my kids literature, but that's neither here nor there. I'm going to reread the question, and we're going to move forward without me making little side remarks about how I pronounce words. What could be happening when birth moms go dark from communication intermittent from time to time? What could be happening when birth moms go dark from communication from time to time? I've actually had this exact question worded 100 different ways from a lot of different adoptive parents that are experiencing this. And I've spoke with some birth moms who have kind of shed a light on what was going through their mind when this happened. And for a lot of women, it just becomes overwhelming to stay in contact. It's like you want it so bad. You want that relationship, you want the updates, but then all of a sudden it hurts so much that you cannot sort through it. You can't process it, and your mind builds up a wall and says, cut communication, protect yourself. And so that's what some birth moms do. They just they cannot process the grief, so they put up a wall to protect themselves. And even in the best of circumstances, you could have the purest heart and genuinely be so loving and encouraging and trying your best to cultivate. I love that word, cultivate, and I feel like I use it a lot, and you've probably noticed that, but it's such a beautiful word for what we're doing in relationships that we're being intentional with. We're cultivating. And I really love symbolism, and I just get this vision in my head of a farmer who cultivates his ground. He has to be intentional and put time into his soil to make sure that he gets a bountiful harvest. And I think that is such a beautiful word to use when we talk about relationships, because it takes a lot of intentional work, and we have to cultivate the soil of the relationships that we're in. And so you could be an adoptive mother with the very best intentions, cultivating that relationship, and it will still not negate the grief that the birth mom carries. And I really feel like this is one of those things, kind of like my grandmother and I have different experiences over the loss of my father. That was her only son, and she's said multiple times, I hope you never know what it feels like to lose a child. A mother should not have to bury her child. And I agree. The way that I grieve his loss is different than the way she grieves his loss, because the way mothers feel about their children is vastly different than how anyone else in their life feels about them. And so I think adding to that concept, anyone who has not placed a child for adoption, it would have a really hard time. You can empathize, you can, have sympathy, but you will not fully understand the loss and the grief and the sorrow that we live with daily. And I think a good example of that in my own life, and I'm very fortunate, and I don't share our story to make anyone else feel jealous or upset that this isn't how their story has played out or is playing out. But with my firstborn, she's about to turn 20. We have a phenomenal relationship and we communicate regularly, and I still carry grief as a birth mom. I still grieve the fact that I needed to make an adoption plan. I still grieve so much of that process for me, and the way that I processed my story was different. I wanted every morsel of contact that I could get, every photo, every piece of art, everything. I wanted all of it. And so I didn't build walls up to shut her out, but I also was only getting contact a couple times a year, and I don't know if maybe it would have felt different for me if it was a consistent thing. Knowing my personality, I don't think it would have. But my personality is not everyone else's personality, and some birth moms just really have to put that wall up and to protect their own hearts. And that could be one possible reason. And another that I've heard of is if birth mom just isn't doing well, if like in life financially, if birth mom struggles with any type of bad relationships or addiction or any of those things, if birth mom isn't doing well, the contact could be coming when she's doing great, and then whenever she's doing poorly, there's less consistency and less follow through. And I experienced that in my own life with my biological father. When he was doing better, I saw more of him. When he was doing worse, I saw less of him. And he was more consistent when he was in a healthy place. He was less consistent when he wasn't. And I think we already, having placed a child, feel like we're not enough. And so if we're not doing well, that's amplified. And I think we feel like the best way to show up is to not show up. And I know that sounds contradictory, but it just seems easier to push away and not be seen as a failure than to show up in our imperfections, if that makes sense. There's so much more pressure as a birth mother. Like as a parent, as a parenting mother, I already beat myself up and struggle on my hard days to believe that I was good enough for my kids that day. As a birth mother, that is amplified. Like magnifying glass right on top of me. I feel like I need to make the best choices always to be a valuable piece of that relationship. And that's nothing that my birth daughter has put on me, but I've shared before when she comes to visit, and it's not just for Instagram views. I did a video about like deep cleaning the house before she comes. Not because she's ever been like, oh, your house is filthy, or because she's ever cared about any of those things. And my house isn't filthy because my husband would not be okay. He really struggles with like clutter and things like that. But even so, like legitimately taking Q-tips around faucets and scrubbing everything before she comes because I need it to be perfect. And it's just this whole extra layer of not expectation, because people are not placing these expectations on us, but it's just this internal drive to be the best version of ourselves. So I think those are two possible explanations. And honestly, it seems simple, like, just ask why. But People aren't typically willing to have those conversations when they're struggling with those behaviors. And I'm also, I'm one person, and I'm able to share my perspective, and I'm able to share the perspectives that have been shared with me. But I'm sure there could be a dozen other reasons behind it, but those are a few possible reasons that birth parents may sometimes be consistent for a while, and then they just, what was the word you used? Go dark. Just no more response. The next question is, what would you want your adopted child to know about your drug use? So that's a very fair question, because that's something that I've shared openly on here, that pre-pregnancy I struggled with addiction and alcoholism. I think kids deserve honesty in age-appropriate ways, right? I don't think that the sentence, your birth mom was a drug user, necessarily is relevant or helpful to a 3-year-old. But whenever you start talking to children about the dangers of drug abuse, about addiction, about how it is hereditary. Addictive behavior is hereditary. It runs through bloodlines. It's the whole nature versus nurture thing. You could have raised your child in a very healthy environment, never struggled with drug abuse, but it runs through the bloodline of your adopted child. And those are important things to know, because you have to be extra vigilant. The child needs to learn to be extra vigilant, just to protect themselves. And so I would never want my child's parents to hide that from her to protect my innocence, because that's just, I feel like that's toxic parenting, to try to hide the things that we've struggled with in an attempt to appear perfect or better, or just, I think perfect really sums it up. Just, we want our kids to think that we only made good choices, because we think if we acknowledge that we made bad choices, then that validates them in their wrongdoing. And that's just not the case. I feel like if we are honest and upfront with our kids to begin with, that makes us a reliable source, right? If they think mom and dad never tried anything bad or never did anything wrong, then they have this expectation that they're placing on themselves, that they need to be perfect to get mom and dad's approval. And if they do mess up, they can't come to mom and dad because mom and dad wouldn't understand. I've never wanted that for my birth daughter. I don't want it for my daughters that I parent. We are very open and honest in age appropriate ways. And so that's something that all of my kids are aware of at this point, because I need them to know that I did mess up. I did make bad choices, and I want them to make better choices. And I'm a safe space and a reliable source of information when it comes to these things. So I feel like I would want her to know the truth. And I know that not all birth mothers feel that way, but very boldly, I say that the child's best interest comes first, then the birth mother's. I don't feel like we should swap those. I don't feel like we should be protecting the adult in the situation at the sake of the children. I feel like the children and their interest needs to come ahead of birth moms, and I stand by that. So maybe I should not make such long answers, or I may not get through half of these in a reasonable segment of time. How can churches support you, or how could they have supported you in the past? During that season of my life, I was not attending a church. I think my guardians were embarrassed of having a pregnant teenager, and I I think we probably avoided a lot of things. I don't know if they were attending a church before they gained guardianship of me. I know that we went after they gained guardianship. I don't know. I don't have a relationship with these people, and I'm not entirely sure if um, if we avoided church because of my situation. And as far as how I would have wanted them to help, I think just to have loved me, to showed up, to had empathy, to have an interest in understanding and not just judging my situation, getting to know me as a person. I think if the church that we eventually attended had been more intentional, maybe they could have picked up on some of the abuse that was happening. I think churches need to offer support groups. If churches are going to support anti-abortion and churches are going to support adoption agencies and funding adoptions, then they should be putting just as much effort into supporting unplanned pregnancies and helping mothers create parenting plans if they want the opportunity to parent their child. They should be pouring just as many resources and coming alongside that mother and helping her build a plan to be able to keep her child. They should be supporting family preservation just as vehemently as they are international adoption, domestic adoption, and anti-abortion. The next question is, what do you want adoptive family to tell your child about you? That I loved her and I love her. I think more than anything, most birth parents are terrified that the adoptive family is telling the child that they were unwanted by birth mom, but wanted and loved by adoptive parents. And that's so damaging, not only to the birth mom, but to the adoptee. And something that I've shared before, I don't mean to repeat stories, but a lot of the things that I've shared, I don't know if everyone's heard them, and they also deserve to be repeated because they are so important. And so I've shared this multiple times. For all that my grandparents did right, they also got a lot wrong, because that's parenting. We live and we learn, and it wasn't intentional. They were doing what they thought was best. But I grew up hearing this exact phrase. I'm not paraphrasing, I'm not rewording. Your mama didn't want you, but we did. And your mama didn't love you, but we do. And they were trying to, I think, explain that her absence didn't mean that I was unwanted and unloved, because they loved me and they wanted me. However, I don't think it was healthy to put that preamble to "we love you, we want you." They could have said "we love you, we want you," without saying "your mama didn't love you, your mama didn't want you." And so I think when you're talking to your adopted children, I think solidifying the fact, and even if it's not just, because I know that we don't all have healthy relationships, and sometimes any relationship with birth family, or even any knowledge of who they are, and then sometimes it's, under bad circumstances. And I think it's okay to also say, your birth mom loved you the best way she knew how. And that's a truth that I tell myself with my own biological parents. It's not that they didn't love me. They didn't love me efficiently. They didn't love me well, but they loved me the best way they knew how. And that is true, and also doesn't make me feel like they just didn't care. You weren't worth it. So I think that is such a valuable thing to tell your kids and to remind them. The next question is, would you want to or do you receive updates on your child from adoptive family? Yes, I wanted every single update that I could get. And at this point, she's 19, so I get she sends me all of her updates. I know what's going on in her world because she communicates with me, and that's been happening since she was about, I can't remember if she was 16 or 17 when she got my phone number, and all of the updates have been on her since then. And the further things go, the more we cultivate this relationship, the closer we get. It's more consistent communication. But for the first 14 or 15 years, I received one envelope of pictures every year around, I can't believe that I can't remember now. It was either around her birthday or Christmas, but I'm thinking around her birthday. Every year I would get a new set of photos, and then starting at 9, we would visit for 2 days every year for a couple. So like the first time it was a couple hours, and then progressively we would spend longer days together, but it was 2 days a year and one package of pictures, and I devoured them. I still have every single thing that was sent to me, all the artwork, and it meant so much to me to get updates. I wanted to see the silly family photos. I wanted to see the ice skating and the trip to the zoo and the cookies that she baked and just all of it. I wanted everything that I could get. I lived for that update, and it was hard. Getting that update was so hard. I would grieve, and for weeks afterwards, it was really emotionally draining for me, but I still wanted them. I wanted them way more than what I got them. I wanted them, and so I was so grateful for them. The next question is, I'm interested in adopting or fostering when I'm older. Any tips for the right way to help, do's or don'ts? This could be a whole episode in itself, but the number one piece of advice that I can give you is please follow the lived experience of others. Listening to voices like mine, and I share other voices all the time on my Instagram. Finding your education solely in a book or from other adoptive and foster parents is not giving you a full education. You have to gather resources from the lived experience of different adoptees, different birth families, and that's how you're going to learn. That's how you're going to grow empathy. That's how you're going to soften to what's going to be more beneficial and healthy for the child. Was it your choice to give your baby up, or were you convinced by family and friends to do it? It was not really my choice. It was worded to make me believe it was my choice, but the conversation that I remember was, you can't parent this child. You will make an adoption plan, or you can't live here. Oh, and you can't go back to your grandparents. So do with that what you want. And I was 14. So 15 by the time I gave birth, but I was 14 years old. So I don't know. Does that sound like a choice to you? It wasn't a choice. It was not, if you want a parent, we support you. If you want to make an adoption plan, we support you. It was, this is your only choice. So if it's your only choice, I guess it's not a choice. So there was not any convincing that had to be done. It was, you do this or you get out. And so I started doing what I was told to do, and I started making the plan. What governs how you feel about your child's adoptive parents? That's a really good question. I think the respect that they give me. And I think respect goes a long way in most of our relationships and how we feel about others. So, respect. Let's see. Can a birth mom place a child without the father's awareness? It happens all the time. But there's loopholes because legally, no, the father is supposed to be made aware. But there's lots of loopholes that allow mothers to place a child without the father knowing. In some instances, there's been fathers to find out and come back and fight for custody of their child that they were not aware was placed for adoption until after the adoption had already been finalized. But yes, they're not supposed to, but they can. Do you recommend it for others that are in similar positions that you were in? No. Yes and no. That's a tough one to answer because I would never want to discredit the life that my daughter has. She has been given more things than I could have ever provided. She's been given stability, something I could have never offered probably for many years. And her parents love her. That's her mom and dad. Like, I'm not her mom. I'm her birth mom, but I'm not her mom. And I would never undermine or negate the beauty of the relationship that they've forged over the years. However, if you have any interest whatsoever in parenting and can be connected to the right resources and find a support system, that would be my recommendation. I would never lightly suggest adoption. It is not this, it was peddled to me as the solution to give your child the best life possible. You move on, and then you go create your best life possible. And that you don't move on. You don't just forget the children that you've carried. And so it's nothing that I would suggest lightly. Is it necessary? Absolutely. Is there circumstances that it really truly is the best option? Every day. Do I feel like it is an easy option? Hell no. Not even kind of. What does your daughter that you placed for adoption call you? Mine and her parents call me Miss Katie. My daughter calls me just by my first name. No miss. Just Raquel. And that is fine by me. Whatever she wants to call me, I'll answer to it. What does the healthiest adoption look like? Open and honest communication, respect, and love. I feel like those are all markers for a healthy adoption. If your kids were removed from CPS, what would you have wanted your social worker to do for support? I don't feel like it would be fair for me to answer this one because my kid was not removed from CPS, and the support that you need in those circumstances is far different than the support that I needed as a pregnant teenager. Thoughts on the infant adoption industry in America? It is an industry, and an industry's goal is to make profit. The adoption industry profits off of mothers that cannot parent their children. And historically, and still today, most adoption agencies prioritize the adoptive parents over biological birth parents. And I feel like a lot of changes need to happen for it to be a healthier system. And I'm not anti-adoption. I'm pro-family preservation. If at all possible, support expectant mothers in a way that allows them to parent their children. But will there be a need for adoption? Always. Always. Sometimes you can be given all the support in the world and still not make the decisions to be in a healthy place to parent. And my father was a prime example. He was running from his own childhood demons. He didn't have a safe or healthy childhood. And even when my grandparents tried to support him in a bunch of different ways, it wasn't enough for him to get well. And so he could have never been a healthy parent. What was your greatest coping mechanism right after placement? Honestly, I was in an unsafe home and I did not really get to cope. I had to distract and I had to suppress and I had to survive. My home got increasingly more unsafe after placement, and there was no immediate coping happening for me. So I've always been really good at deflecting and suppressing, which has a place. I don't think it's necessarily unhealthy. We do need space to process, but if you are using healthy distraction as a coping tool, I don't really think that that's an evil. I don't think that it's healthy for us to sit in our grief all the time trying to process it. It's unproductive, but there has to be a healthy balance, right? And I had no opportunity to do any of it. So I don't really, I wrote a ton. I guess maybe that was my one escape. Most of my notebooks got burned after I ran away, so I don't have them. I have one notebook left from poems that I wrote during that season of time, and maybe I'll share one of them. But it, I guess writing was a bit of an escape for me. How does it feel to have your books in a library? That is such a cool milestone. It is. I never thought that I would be where I am today. I never thought that I would be advocating for this community, talking about these things, writing children's books, and to have them in libraries now, to have them in my oldest daughter's library, just really, really surreal. In our case, I would like to know why birth mom fought for one son but not the one she didn't care for while in utero. Why is the one that opened the case mean less than the one who was already 3 years old? What makes one life worth more than the other? I'm sorry. Whenever your brain is in survival mode, you don't always make decisions that are rational. It's very hard, in fact, to make rational decisions when your brain is just trying to survive. And that's the only explanation. That's not an excuse, but that is an explanation, and that is without knowing the full story, without knowing her, without knowing any of the other nuances. That's the only answer I got. We have always fostered with the intent to reunify, but it's not happening in one case. We are very close with the boy's mom. She's mommy. I'm my first name, which is fine by us. So would it be okay to acknowledge her as a birth mom or just as mom? I have no intention of ever taking her place, just wondering what the best thing to do might be. It depends on the age of the child. Children will typically follow the suit of the parents, and so if you continue to refer to her as mom or you change to birth mom, then young children will mimic that. But if the child is older, they should absolutely just be given the space to decide. And a lot of times, if you start, say you continue to say mom or mama, insert first initial or first name, and as the child ages and understands and processes their story more, they may change the language, and that's okay. I think giving them the tools and the words to process, understand, and then vocalize how they feel is super valuable. Let's see. So, for those watching, you're definitely going to notice a wardrobe change and probably a different angle. And for those just listening, you may even notice a difference in audio. This is the reality of being an entrepreneur while living nomadically and being a stay-at-home full-time mom and chef and doctor, and you guys get the point. I do it all. So the reality of that is I don't always have uninterrupted blocks of time. So I started filming this episode a couple days ago, and we're going to continue where we left off, if I can remember what question that was on. Okay, we're coming out of the gate with a really heavy question, and I've actually been asked this multiple times from multiple different people, and trigger warning, it is a question about abortion. And this follower asked, how do birth moms feel about abortion and their thoughts on all the circumstances and feelings that led to that choice from their perspective of already having chosen adoption? This is a question I absolutely cannot answer on behalf of all birth mothers. Me personally, I have been used without my consent as a poster child for anti-abortion articles. I just occasionally Google my name because I'm curious what kind of stuff comes up, and there have been anti-abortion websites use my story without having ever contacted me to promote their cause. That said, I really want to answer this the way that I try to answer everything, honest but gentle. I, in my heart and in my mind, do not feel that abortion is the answer. I also do not feel that adoption is the solution for abortion. I think adoption is not the opposite of abortion. Carrying a child full term and parenting would be the opposite of abortion. Parenting a child would be the opposite of placing a child for adoption. Like, it's not. They're not the same. And here's what I know to be true from some birth moms that I've spoken with. Some that were in far more horrendous situations than I found myself in. When you've never feared for your life, when you've never been put in dangerous situations, when you've never had to question if the child you are carrying and will birth will then fall into the hands of evil, it's really difficult to speak on, I guess, the evil of abortion. I have a lot of stories swirling through my head that are not mine to tell. They belong to different people that have shared them with me. But the truth is, there are far more sadistic things happening in this world than you would like to believe. Than I would like to believe. And because of that, I've known women that have chose abortion quite literally to save their child from a lifetime of abuse. Women that were born into trafficking rings and knew that their unplanned pregnancies due to the abuse that they sustained would result in another child being born into a trafficking ring. And it's heartbreaking, absolutely heart-wrenching to sit with these women and hear these stories. I've known women that I love and respect who have shared with me that they have had abortions in younger years and that they truly felt like that was the best option at the time, and now they grieve and they mourn. I've sat with women that I loved and respected that shared that they did have abortions and they still feel like that was the right decision for them. It's all heartbreaking. None of it is easy. I don't feel fully equipped to answer this question without it turning into a 1 hour answer. This is absolutely a topic that I'm willing to discuss, and I feel like I would want to discuss at length in a long episode, not in the 5 or 10 minutes that I'm trying to give myself per question. And I definitely, there's a reason that women that have placed children have chosen that path over abortion. So although I cannot answer for all birth mothers, most of them have some type of moral code that makes them feel like abortion wasn't the option. There's lots of women that can believe that without shaming individuals who choose differently. And I think I fall in that camp because I've heard so many stories and I've seen the heart of others who have made that decision, and they have to process it for the rest of their life, just like I have to live with my adoption plan and process it for the rest of my life. Two completely different outcomes, two completely different griefs, but still grief. And yeah, I don't know where to go from here. I don't know how to keep discussing this without it turning into a huge story. So maybe that's something that I can tackle in a later episode, because like I said, it's not an uncommon question. I've had it a lot about, why you would choose life and not abortion, why you would why a lot of birth mothers would, how birth mothers feel about that. And again, I can only answer for myself. I cannot answer for every other woman, but I guess I have some general ideas of why some or most birth mothers choose an adoption plan versus an abortion. So that's a valid question, but like I said, it's not one that I feel like I can adequately answer in a short frame of time. The next question is how to honor Mother's Day with no contact order in place. I actually shared some resources on my Substack and on Instagram before Mother's Day that answered this question, but for those that are already planning ahead for next year, that's not my personality. I don't plan anything that far in advance, but I have friends that do, so I know y'all are out there. So for the ones that are curious moving forward for any holiday, really, if there's a no contact order in place, how can you still honor birth mother? And as with a lot of questions, it depends greatly on the age of the children in question. And so if you're wanting to honor birth mother with little kids that don't fully understand the concept, or maybe that's not even just for birth mothers. Normally no contact order in place is with while it's within the foster care system. So if rights haven't been terminated, that would be a biological mom. Either way, you can print a photo book with, I used to really love, what was it called? Chatbooks. And my kids have tons of little photo albums. Since then, I'll show you what I do now. So I always had printed chat books, and then we got to a campground that wouldn't allow us to receive mail. So we canceled our chat book subscription, and then I quit printing photos, and I hated that because my kids love looking through photos. Children love photos. And now I have a box for each year, and it's full of old style Polaroids, and it's actually Fuji brand printer and it's like the old school Polaroid paper. It's not just printed on a piece of paper with a border. Legitimate Polaroid style photos. And I go through and I pick 10 to 20 photos a month and print them and put them in a box. So that's a fun little, I don't know, it's a lot of nostalgia, aesthetically pleasing, super into photography. I collect old cameras, things of that nature, which is why that matters to me. But it doesn't have to be a Polaroid printer. It can be 4x6s at Walmart. It can be one of the chat book type options, or they print photo books at Walgreens, Walmart, any of those places. Super great option for kids. Kids love looking through books. It doesn't have to be fancy, professional photos, just whatever you have. Put a little book together, and most of them will let you put captions, and if you can't put a caption, just get a Sharpie and write mama, daddy, whatever the child calls you, a pet, a friend, a favorite place. Like, just put all those things in the book for them to be able to flip through. That's a great option for younger children. I think older children that kind of understand the story, it can go one of two ways. They can be really angry at biological or birth mom or dad and not really care or want to celebrate. And I think it's super important to honor those feelings. But they could also be really sad and want the contact and be upset that they can't have it. And I think in those situations, again, get a box bigger than the one that I just showed you with all my Polaroids in it. And you can get those boxes at Hobby Lobby for like $4 or $5. And let that be a keepsake box, a memory box. You can throw photos into it, or even put one of those photo books into it. You can encourage the child to keep a journal where they write things that they want to share with this biological parent and keep the journal tucked in there, or you can encourage them to write letters that they can seal if they want to, as long as you've explained, like, at this time you can't get it to them. Just let them collect those things. Like, these are things that we're collecting for birth mom, for birth dad, for biological parents, to maybe hopefully one day show them. And if not, it can make them feel better just to get it off their chest and have a special place to collect things for those parents. And on that note, I will say I did have a birth mom reach out to me, and because I had shared this suggestion before, way back when, and a birth mom reached out to me and said, thank you so much for saying that, because I actually had parents, my child's adoptive parents, kept a box like that for me, and I went no contact for years because it was just too traumatizing. I could not stay in touch. It was too hard for me, and they didn't lose hope. They kept this box, and whenever I was able to finally reach out again and we reunified, they gave me this box of all these moments I thought I would never see, or all the years that I felt like I had missed. They were able to hand me this box, and she said it was just incredibly powerful and thoughtful and appreciated. So that's my advice for that. Here's the next question. Does it actually feel, I say that word wrong. Fill is like you're filling a hole, but I say, like, how does it feel? Because I'm from Tennessee. But feel. How does it actually feel like you are meeting your child if you meet them when they are adults? That wasn't my experience. However, I have spoke with several birth moms who were not able to reunify, until adulthood. And there's actually a book that I suggest to everyone who wants to understand what a lifelong process the grief that we carry is. And the book is called Waiting. It was written by Kathy LaGrow about Mishka. I can't remember her name now. It's been a while since I read the book, but it's actually reviewed as a book on the bookshelf on my website. But anyway, the book is called Waiting, or The Waiting, by Kathy LaGrow, and it's one woman's journey as a birth mother into her 90s. And she was, I can't remember if she was either in her 80s or in her 90s, early 90s, when she finally got to reunify and meet her birth daughter for the very first time. And she just, in that book, explained, like, this was her baby. These women were both old women at this point, but that was her baby. And so I have spoke with other birth mothers. It wasn't quite that long into the journey for them, but ones that maybe were in their 40s or 50s before they reunified with children that were in their 30s or 40s, and said how it just feels like this is my baby that I've been waiting for all this time. And so it seems like that's a very common experience. I think there are probably others. I know that I've spoke to some birth moms that feel a disconnect, and I think a lot of it is rooted in fear, like not wanting to overstep or make our birth children feel uncomfortable or offend adoptive family. And so sometimes there's that disconnect, and it just feels almost like a wedge separating. But I don't know. I think it is very common that it still feels very much like this is my child. As an adoptive mom, what do you, as a birth mom, need from me to feel heard, seen, and valued? So, I'm trying to dissect that sentence in my mind. What do I need from the adoptive mom to feel heard, seen, and valued? This is such a beautiful question, and it really does wonders for my heart to hear so many adoptive parents. I have so many that reach out to me and with just questions of how can I cultivate this relationship? How can I put in the effort that makes birth mom feel invited in and not pushed away? And I think I answered a similar question earlier, like the question was something like, what determines how you feel about adoptive parents? And my answer to that was to be respected and loved. And it's the same for this, to be able to feel heard and seen and valued. I want to just be respected as a human. I want to be respected as an individual that may have varying views or, different approaches to parenting or life in general, but still respected as if you would anyone else in your life. And I think sometimes there's this wall that we put up between ourselves and biological family because it's scary and we don't want our kids to like them more. Just being transparent, that's, I think, a common denominator for a lot of adoptive parents, and that's a human feeling. That's not completely absurd. It's something that we need to work on, but it's something that's common, and it's okay to admit that and then to work on it. But just being able to respect them as a person, respect me as a person, invite me in. What's that quote? Don't build higher fences, build longer tables. Invite me in. I don't want to take your place. I would say 99% of the birth mothers I've had the privilege of speaking with do not want to take the place of their child's adoptive parents. That's the least thing. That's the furthest thing from our mind. And it's it's really just wanting a peek in the window, wanting to see them live their life and thrive and have joy and experience things, and just getting to see that, whether it's if you're close enough to be able to have birthday parties together, even if you don't want to mix birth family with adoptive family, if it's just a little private celebration after or before the big party, going out to dinner together, things like that. I feel like knowing that I'm a valued part of the relationship, you're allowed to set up boundaries. I have a really great resource on my website that you can download called Boundaries Before Walls. And I think that is really such an important tool moving forward in relationships where boundaries need to be put in place. And there's nothing wrong with setting boundaries, but boundaries before walls. How to tell a child who asks where their birth mom is when you don't know. Moves around, inconsistent housing, does not keep records updated, etc. I think honesty. I promote that a lot, and I don't want to overuse it, but I mean, it's just child appropriate truths. You know, whenever you're having these conversations with your children, they don't always need the nitty-gritty details, but they deserve to know the truth. And just, if they're asking where birth mom is and you honestly don't know because she moves, she's inconsistent, she doesn't keep records updated, then you say, I don't know. I'm really sorry, but I don't know. You don't have to go into the details, but if they ask, that's okay too. The latest research that I've read suggests that adoptees should know their full story by the time they're 12 years old. So little bite-sized chunks of their story leading up to that is so much healthier than, okay, you're 12, here it is. So I think just saying the truth in gentle ways. How could adoptive parents know it's safe in the future to reach out when birth mom is currently engaged in unsafe activities, in trouble with the law, violent, etc.? There's no guarantee. There's never a guarantee. My suggestion in these circumstances is that initial contact can just be with the adults in the situation. You don't drag the children into it unnecessarily early. Whether that's, hey, why don't we get together for coffee? And you can pretty quickly gauge the situation and then decide moving forward how to create boundaries for healthy contact to include the child. But I think it's okay in circumstances like that to just let that be between you guys for a while, you know. And I really wanted to focus on birth mom stories and birth mom content for the month of May, but I already have so many other topics for other areas of adoption and kinship care, and I definitely want to talk on boundaries over walls. I want to talk on unsafe versus uncomfortable. Like, I just have all these great ideas swirling around of things that I want to talk about and explore in greater detail. This is my last one, and it's not a question, it is a comment, and it says, just a comment, thankful that open adoptions are recognized as positive and healthier now. And I know this woman, she's a birth mom. She's a bit older than me, and I know for me personally, when I made an adoption plan 20 years ago, even, this level of openness was unheard of, absolutely unheard of. You would have been hard pressed to find any type of content available to talk about birth mothers in a positive light. So what I've seen in my lifetime is just absolutely unreal. And as a birth mom, I think I've shared this before. So I share as a child of kinship care. I share as a birth mom and I share as a kinship adoptive mom. And none of those things has impacted my life more than being a birth mom. I have more grief, more trauma, just more everything connected to being a birth mom. And the resources have always been sparse. We have always been villainized. And just living in this moment, watching my story come full circle, and have a platform to speak from, to have people that are listening to what I have to say and letting me share other stories and more information that I've gathered from talking to more birth moms. It's mind-blowing to me. It really is. But I'm glad that you guys are here. I'm glad that you're interested in asking these questions and leaning in and learning. And as I love to remind you, there isn't a person you wouldn't love if you knew their whole story. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel, to this dadgummit, I just saw my husband walk by and it distracted me. Subscribe to all the things, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.